We've done over 2,500 adoption loans. And this was something that we only started in 2009.
Most Americans are worried about debanking and are establishing a variety of banking accounts as a result. It makes people feel like they want to be part of that herd.
It's that easy answer. Well, at least just move your banking somewhere so that those funds that are going to be lent out, right? 90% of your dollars are going to be lent out. At least let them be lent out by people you trust to people you care about.
Hello and welcome to the Liberty Spenders Podcast. I'm Kurt Luidhardt, your host and co-founder of the Prosper Group, an agency that's helped raise over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Now, Liberty Spenders make up basically 76.5 million people, and they're motivated to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. And if you want to learn more, you can get access to our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free. And we have a perfect match for Liberty Spenders for today's episodes. We have Frank Clements, who's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at America's Christian Credit Union. Frank is a passionate leader who's dedicated to empowering Christian ministries, schools, and families through faith-based financial solutions. And with a background in organizational psychology and an expertise in building partnerships, he's driven impactful initiatives like ACCU's collaborations with Every Life. And by the way, we're an Every Life customer, although our son just got out of diapers, so sorry, Every Life. And the Association of Classical Christian Schools supporting adoption, education, and pro-life causes. Today, we'll explore his insights on aligning financial stewardship with Christian values. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kurt. It's awesome to be here.
You know, we met at the National Religious Broadcasters, and I was enthusiastic to see you guys there. It's kind of an interesting topic for me because most people, myself included, aren't really thinking about banking when it comes to sort of how to bring our values to the marketplace. And we're not thinking about what happens to our money after we pass it off to the bank, as long as it's there when we want it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought this would be a good place to start. Why would somebody who is a person of faith or, a Liberty Spender like the people we talk to, why would they want to pick a bank that shares their values?
Yeah. Do you remember a few years ago that the saying from Silicon Valley kind of came out in the open, and everybody started thinking about social media, and there's this idea that if the product is free, you are the product, right? Like if Facebook is happy to give you access to Facebook because now they can serve up ads to you, right? And so you are the product for all those advertisers out there, and you're familiar with this idea for sure.
Yeah.
With banking, what I've noticed is the number one most important thing for people is convenience. Right. So a lot of people will choose a bank because they love the app. Maybe there's a branch on every corner, right? It's just easy. And it doesn't cost them anything, right? Most people are not paying for banking. Maybe if you run a small business, you're paying, $10 or $15 a month, let's say. And so when you think about banking and, why are they offering this awesome app and a branch on every corner for free? Well, it's because you're the product, and more specifically, your money is the product, right? So banks exist to more or less borrow the money of their depositors and then take that money that they borrowed, usually at a pretty low rate, and turn around and invest it somewhere else where they think they can get a better return. And so, based on, banking regulations, financial institutions can lend out about 90% of your money. So even a lot of people are like, well, I've got $1,000 in a checking account. What difference does it make? Well, 900 of those dollars are being lent to somebody. They're being invested somewhere. And so I'm always trying to encourage people to think about what's your money doing when you're not using it? Because I promise you it's doing something. And there's a good chance that it's doing something that you wouldn't actually agree with if you understood the values of your bank and where they're choosing to invest your funds.
Well, I've always had this mental picture, they're loaning it out. What is it from what's John Stewart's It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah.
My money's in somebody else's home, right?
Right.
But I'm sure that the our bank is doing with it's much broader than that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's, I understand that people are probably coming from different backgrounds. And so, what they view as controversial, it kind of depends on the person. But, for instance, I think probably I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to guess that probably a lot of people who are watching this program don't like the idea of, let's say, transgender surgery for minors. That's
Right.
probably something that a lot of people can agree on.
Safe assumption. Yes.
All right. Okay, good. And so if you're with one of these big banks, I promise you at some point, probably fairly often, they have lent out their customers' money to organizations that are building clinics where they're going to be doing, transgender surgeries for minors. And again, like banks don't have money. They have no money. The only money that they can deploy in the marketplace is their customers' money. And so if you've got your money sitting at one of these big banks, at one point or another, your money is going to end up supporting, through a loan or even through like a charitable contribution to one of these, kind of radical nonprofits. You're going to end up indirectly supporting things that you're then going to go home and complain about over dinner. And so there's kind of this mismatch where, I can't believe they're doing it. Well, guess what? You actually kind of helped make it happen.
Yeah. Well, so I have a mental picture now of perhaps what, say, a big bank might do with it. What would ACCU do with it, which would be different?
Yeah. And this is where, as much as I want to pitch ACCU, even more than that, I want to pitch the idea of everybody finding a financial institution that actually shares their values. And I love, your point about It's a Wonderful Life. Like your money is in his house and, your money is in their car, right? And so at America's Christian Credit Union, we just celebrated 67 years. So we've been around for a while, but we were founded by pastors. And so our focus has always been on serving, folks in ministry, the ministries themselves. We work with a lot of faith-based nonprofits, and then the congregants of those ministries, the folks sitting in the pews in those churches. And so, over the years, we've done over 1,000 church loans. You think about it, like maybe driving to work, you see a church that's under construction. There's a good chance that they got a loan, and there's a good chance that they got a loan from us, because church lending in particular it's just very specific, and a lot of commercial lenders don't really understand it, aren't comfortable with it, would rather do multifamily stuff. And so we've done over 1,000 of these church loans to help these ministries grow and be able to reach more people in the community. We've done over 2,500 adoption loans. And this was something that we only started in 2009. But we realized that when people were wanting to, they felt like God was calling them to adopt. And then they looked at the cost of a private adoption. And especially if it's international, it can be $50,000. And, there's this dilemma where people are asking, do I wait? Do I fundraise and do this in 5 years? But then in 5 years, like I'm older, I want to be young when I bring this child into my home so that, I have the energy to take care of this little bundle of joy. And so we came up with this adoption financing program to meet that need. So we've been able to work with, and honestly, we've done 2,500 adoption loans, but there have been countless other families where we said, you don't actually need an adoption loan. What you really need to do is consolidate some of your debt over here, maybe roll it into a HELOC so you get a slightly lower interest rate, and just work with them so that they have that financial capacity to say yes to what God is calling them to do.
Very interesting. And I'm not adopted, but I have some friends who have, and I have a full appreciation of how expensive it is, which is sort of a travesty in and of itself. We have lots of kids who need good parents, and we're creating these massive financial obstacles to make it happen. If you're talking to somebody new about ACCU, you gave some general examples. Is there one specific one that gets you excited of the kind of thing you've been able to do?
Yeah, well, there's I bring this one up a lot because it's my favorite. The impact is just so obvious. But there's a Christian school up in Oregon, and they get a lot of rain there, so they had to replace a roof on their gym, and their contractor said, "Don't worry about it. I can do some short-term financing for you, so you can get through construction, and then you'll just go refinance it later." And they said, "Great, we got to do the work, right? We got to fix the roof." And so they do the work. They get to the end of it, and they go to their current bank at the time, and their bank says, "No, we're not going to refinance that loan for you because we don't believe that you are good for it financially." And so they ended up talking to another 4 banks. So they talked to 5 banks total, and every single one of them said no. And they're paying like double-digit interest on this loan, on this construction that they had to do. And they're starting to wonder, could this be the thing that actually ends our school? Fixing the roof of our gym, is that actually going to close our doors permanently? And then they somehow they heard about America's Christian Credit Union. We got in touch with them and we worked with them through that process, and we were able to refinance that loan so that the monthly payment was something they could actually handle. And as a result of us saying yes and working with them and going that extra mile to put them in a good financial state, they ended up being able to buy the land next door and building a whole new academic building. And now they've doubled their enrollment. So when we met them, they had 200 students. They now have 400 students, which means there are 200 students at their school who I guess didn't have access to a Christian education before and do now, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what gets me the most excited, is knowing that when we say yes to these ministries and we say, we will partner with you, we will help you through this, they now have more capacity to do what God's called them to do where they are.
Yeah. Well, you've got me curious now also just about the just about the economics of it too. Now, I would think, but I'm sort of biased, right? I go to a church. I love church.
Yeah.
I would think churches are good credit risks, right? You've got, they tend to be, every church I've been involved in has been very conservative with their finances and, very careful with their budgets. And to my knowledge, did a good job of paying their bills. But maybe an outside observer, and certainly some of these other banks see them as a risk. Is there something about the underwriting or the way you look at a church loan that makes you feel more confident? Hey, this is actually not only are we doing good work, right? And God's will in helping fund Christian ministries or provide them access to funds, but it's actually a really good business decision.
Oh yeah, I mean, for us, it's phenomenal, and I hope that other banks continue to not like doing church lending because it's been great for us. I would say I think there's two issues that other financial institutions will struggle with when they're doing that underwriting. To your point, one is what's the revenue source of a church?
Mm-hmm.
It's donations. It's people who show up every Sunday and put money in a little basket, or I guess now you can do it from your phone, right? But it's people who, under no contractual obligation, continue to give money to that organization. And so that right there, again, these commercial lenders, they'll say, well, with the multifamily, I know what market rent is. I know how many units you have. I know what your vacancy rate's going to be. And so I'm comfortable lending you the money because I know how you're going to repay it. And so for a financial institution where, let's say, most of the people in the commercial lending department don't go to church, don't routinely give money to a ministry, they're going to say, I don't know. I mean, even if you show me that there's been a solid history of giving in the past, I have no reason to believe that will continue. I don't get it. I don't know why people come to your church. I don't know why they give to your church. And this feels like a risk. And then the other thing is reputational. And we definitely saw, we're seeing this more and more where I would say a lot of financial institutions, they don't want to be associated with the typical church. And they might say, your church is doing okay now, but all it takes is your pastor saying one thing, and all of a sudden you're all over the news, and who knows what happened. You're surrounded by protesters and the whole nine yards. So even there, it's for a lot of these financial institutions, they would say, this is not our look. This is not this is not our speed.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned that people can do business with you if they want to, make sure their money, their banking is going to good places. But if somebody wanted that same goal and they were just looking for an easy step, obviously one answer would be, hey, there's this Christian credit union they should be doing business with. But what's one step somebody could take to help in this?
Well, I think, the big hurdle that people always voice, and I don't disagree, but there's, when you think about like all the things that are connected to your checking account in particular, right? All those automatic payments, like your mortgage payments coming out every month. Maybe you have Amazon, and so that Amazon Prime subscriptions coming out of there every month. Hopefully you're spending money on Public Square, and so you've got your card linked up there. And so all these entanglements, and I think in some, it's convenient, but it's also an entanglement. And I think probably it's that way a little bit by design. But what I encourage people, there's no law against having more than one financial institution. There's nothing wrong with having accounts at more than one bank or credit union. And so don't think of it as something that you have to like do all at once, because that's the thing is when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like switch over all my payments. And then what if I forgot one? And then it, pulls from my old account and I get an overdraft fee and all that. So I just counsel people, start small, just open the account, put $100 in it, right? Or maybe you've got some reserves, open up a certificate or put some money in a high yield savings account, right? And so now you've got your accounts at the two different financial institutions, and then you can link those accounts and make it really easy to transfer money back and forth. And Kurt, do you remember back in 2023, there was, Silicon Valley Bank closed down, First Republic Bank. Okay. And I hope you weren't personally affected by any of that. That was insane.
No.
But, there were people who only had an account at First Republic Bank. That's all they had.
Yeah.
And so then when headlines started swirling that First Republic was in trouble and that they might be closing down, people start freaking out and pulling their deposits out. And so the people who pull their deposits out are generally people who already had an account somewhere else. And they could, initiate an electronic transfer, boom, the money's gone. But there are people who only had an account at First Republic. And then they were like, shoot, what do? I really hope that FDIC insurance that we always hear about works this time, or I hope they figure it out. Right. And so I actually think there's some wisdom in having accounts at more than one financial institution, because then you do have that option. And especially if you're running a business or a ministry, think in terms of business continuity, because, during 2024 was, I think, the worst for debanking. During 2024, we had about 24 organizations come to us that said, we need business banking because we literally were expelled by our bank. And depending on when that happens, it could be, Wednesday of payday week, right? And so it's like Wednesday, and all of a sudden you don't have your checking account that you use to, make payroll with, and you're like, how am I going to pay my employees? And so I think there's a lot of wisdom in having more than one financial institution, and so then you open up that account somewhere else, perhaps a place where you feel like your values are going to be a little bit more respected, where your money's going to be stewarded on behalf of your values, and now you have that peace of mind knowing that you have options.
Yeah, I like that as a first step, and I'm also a big believer in multiple financial institutions. And because I am one of those people, I've got accounts in several places just for that reason that you're talking about. In fact, I can still remember, having a situation like that. It wasn't with a bank, but it was with an institution I used to trade securities, and they were having issues. And the only reason I got my money out was because I was able to, make a quick trade into another institution I had a relationship with. It's not a story I'll bother everybody with, but I can still distinctly remember recognizing there was an emergency and doing all these transactions on my phone while I was driving, which was probably super dangerous. But the fact that I had that separate relationship was important. And I've continued that in banking now. But I think you hit the nail on the head. You think, okay, I have had a banking relationship with such and such a bank for so long. And the idea of making a switch to a new one, particularly if I'm switching absolutely everything, sounds like a job, And so doing a little bit at a time makes that feel, that's not hard. Sometimes one of the one institution I use is my bank that I try to deliberately forget, and I put money in every month, and I try to forget it's there because it's like my secret savings, right?
Yep.
I don't include it in my here's money I have to spend, and I find that to be a very valuable exercise. It's so I do think that's a great step for people, and we've all heard of what you're talking about, which is this debanking issue, and there's all sorts of reasons. Some organizations have struggled with that. Some it's because they become outspoken on issues of faith, and it becomes a real challenge for churches, socially conservative organizations, and so it's easy to you're preaching to the converted here on the idea of debanking. But I think some people think maybe it's still kind of a fringy thing, and you said you were running into a couple of dozen institutions, and that's just the ones who came to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and Kurt, I know you've done a lot of work in the political world, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like when you're working on a campaign, right? How do you motivate people, especially if it's one of these down ballot campaigns where there's the risk that people just won't show up? It's not that they don't agree with what you're saying, but they can't bring themselves to schlep on down to the polling site and actually cast that ballot. What have you seen work to sort of motivate people to see how little things, right? Little changes add up to make, the big difference that we all want to see.
Yeah, I do think it's little changes. It's just what's the one step that many other people are already taking, right? So it's the feeling that you're part of a movement and that other people are doing it is key, right? We've learned never to emphasize the fact we never want people to believe they're in the minority on something. Most Americans are worried about debanking and are establishing a variety of banking accounts as a result. It makes people feel like they want to be part of that herd, as opposed to saying, you want to be one of the few and the proud who are prepared, right? What people hear in that situation is it's not really important because very few people do it, right? And I like how you talk about, well, there are simple steps you can take. Small, you can have 2 bank accounts. With my current bank, that's sort of how it started with me too. I had an old bank that I no longer bank with, and this new institution. When I was a little rinky-dink business, they were the people who took a risk on me and gave me a $15,000 line of credit, which might as well have been $1 million at the time, and it's much bigger now. But over time, I just transferred things and stopped really using the other institution. And then one day I just closed the account. It wasn't a big deal anymore, And so those small changes, I think, are important to talk to people about that. And the fact that most people are doing this, and I think that's probably true. Most people have, who are, have multiple bank accounts, right? Or have relationships, and if not for nothing else, then you might have a bank and then an institution that you have your mortgage with, which would be different than the bank, right? Or an institution that loans you for your car or whatever. These are all pretty natural occasions. Why wouldn't you think of it as, start a high yield savings account over here? And it's great to have it. I got to trap myself. I know if I have it some other place, some other bank that's not tied to my, credit card payments or something, that I won't touch it. So it's a cheat, right? But I do think, and also as a political person who understands the wins, we may feel a little more safe now because we think Trump is less likely, and maybe is highly unlikely to engage in any kind of debanking. But I would be prepared that, he won't be president forever. And even if he's replaced by a Republican who we can trust more, like a J.D. Vance or something, that a Democrat, when the Democrats finally do win back power, it's revenge time.
Oh, yeah.
And so it would be unwise, I think, for people to feel too confident just because we have somebody in the White House we trust more right now. In part because he's been so bold, even in his first few months, to come in and get some action taken on issues that Republicans have talked about forever, like shrinking the size of the federal government. And after no Republican president succeeding at that, we finally have somebody who did it and did it with aggressiveness. So now we know that I think the revenge comes even more aggressively when they decide, well, Trump cut the Department of Education budget. Now we're going to quadruple what we were spending before. Or Trump stopped going after Christian institutions. Now we're going to amp up the heat. So I don't think
especially, and you make a great point. I mean, several great points. But, I think I've heard of a lot of pastors, being accused of being too political. But I also know of a lot of congregants who are like, I'm glad my pastor is finally talking about things that have, that bear on our everyday life, Yeah. And so I do think that there is, in that revenge cycle that's coming, whether it's, in 3 years or in 8 years or whatever, somebody somewhere is realizing, wow, churches are a great source of mobilization for primarily conservative voters. And so how do we stop them from being able to mobilize voters, so that we don't have a repeat of 2024? So I think that I could totally see that happening and that being, something that people need to keep in the back of their minds. And we're in that. It's like, Joseph in Egypt, right? Like we're in those years of plenty. And I think all of us run the risk of getting complacent. And whether that's, not showing up at the midterm elections, or, you're going to see a lot of businesses changing their tune. And people are going to assume that they have like a real change of heart. It's like, no, they didn't. They've got their finger, to the wind. They're figuring out which way the wind is blowing. And so things may be good for you now, but they probably won't continue to be this good. And if you don't take this time of plenty to prepare for, a time of, the lean years ahead, you're going to look back and regret it. You're going to think, gosh, like back then it was easy to move my money around, or back then it was easy to, make my voice heard on social media without being censored and whatever. And so and you probably see this too, Kurt, and I think a lot of the people that you talk to, we're all really happy because of the current administration, but don't let that happiness lead to complacence. Let that, let's use this as a time to keep building that momentum, and actually instituting the kinds of changes in our society that we've been wanting to see for so long.
Yeah, well, that's essentially the theme of, in many cases, of what we're doing with Liberty Spenders. We do think that there's this group of people we talk about that every business ought to be talking to and targeting, but I also think there's a greater good here to be achieved, and we need to empower institutions like yours, in part because even if we, you guys are going to see pressure just like everybody else does, right? I mean, you have regulators, you have people from the government who come popping in to take a look at what you're doing, and having people who you can trust completely, who are on your side and aren't going to make the quick compromise because it may feel financially expedient at the moment, is key. And, I'm sure you've experienced that in 67 years where, some typical government bureaucrat comes with an axe to grind, and they see your commitment to values as a threat.
Hey, business owners, did you know there's 76.5 million faith-based and conservative consumers that are looking to support brands that align with their values?
That's a $5 trillion opportunity, and if you're not tapping into it, you're leaving money on the table. Our new book, Liberty Spenders, is your ultimate guide to reaching this influential audience using conviction-driven marketing.
That's right. We break down real-world strategies that successful brands are using right now to connect with this audience authentically, build trust, and drive long-term business growth.
So if you're truly serious about standing out in today's crowded market, grab your copy today on Amazon or visit libertyspenders.com. And don't miss out on this revolutionary strategy called conviction-driven marketing.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, we were joking about this before we started recording, but we're based in Southern California, which seems like the worst place to have a Christian credit union. But this is where, I have to give all glory to God. I mean, he's done something amazing. We actually have a really good relationship with our regulators, and we've had the opportunity to, I'm not going to say we're like sharing the gospel, but, we're not opposed to it, but we've been able to educate them, on the financials of faith-based nonprofits in particular, because they're sure in the early days, there were times where they'd be like, are you sure about that loan? And we'd say, yes, we're sure about this loan. And, the 10 loans we made before it that all worked out just fine. And so we've actually had the opportunity to show that we have the expertise to meet the needs of these organizations, and that, it's not spray and pray. Like we're being really careful and we're doing our due diligence. It's just that we know what we're looking at and we know how to assess risk in this space. But I'm thinking, Kurt, about your example of when you launched your business and you got that $15,000 line of credit. And this is where, I often talk about, the deposits that people are willing to entrust with America's Christian Credit Union are the fuel for the kingdom. They're the fuel for this parallel economy that we're all trying to create. And that's the thing, I don't want this to sound like, I'm not begging for charity here, but when people understand that, if Kurt had come to us and asked for a $15,000 line of credit and we wanted to give it to him, but we didn't have the deposits to do it because we just made a loan last week and now we have to hit pause on our lending, it might be that nothing against you, Kurt, but we can't make that line of credit because we don't have the deposits to do it. And so encouraging people to understand that wherever you put your money, you're fueling something, right? You're providing the fuel, the capital for the growth of something. And so if it's with one of these big banks, you're probably fueling the growth of a lot of things that you, like I said earlier, complain about over the dinner table, right? Or with your friends, versus, and thank God we haven't had this issue, right? So I'm not trying to imply that we're hard up or anything, but there are hundreds of thousands of churches out there. There are tens of thousands of Christian schools out there. There are, I don't even know how many Christian-owned small businesses, and all of them, if they had access to capital from a financial partner that trusted them and shared their vision, they could grow and they could be making an impact in their respective communities. And slowly but surely, we could see sort of an enduring revival going on here in America, right? Like one election is not enough to, turn everything around. It's great that we have a favorable administration, but then we have to take the time to make the changes, at the state level and the county level and the city level and in our own neighborhoods. And so what I love is just building up this pile of capital here at our credit union. We give great rates to our depositors, but then we can turn around and we can make that money available to really awesome organizations and individuals who are doing amazing work all over the country. And so thinking of your deposits as fuel for something, recognizing that it's your deposits are the capital that are feeding into some kind of a system. And so, think carefully about what you want to see grow and what you'd perhaps like to starve of capital.
Yeah. Something you said, if I were articulated in a political campaign, I would say, what if I could show you a way where you could support financially a large number of Christian institutions to help them grow, but not spend one extra dollar? Would you do it? And everyone would say, well, of course I would do it. And what you just described is all you have to do is take that $1,000 you have on savings at Citibank and deposit it over at the America's Christian Credit Union, and you've just accomplished that. And you've not spent one penny. You've not added to your tithe, right? And you will have funded. You may have funded a church building or a school building or an adoption by parents, and so I think that's a really compelling argument here, right? I mean, it's we're not asking you to find an extra $1,000 this month to give to an organization. We're just asking you to take that $1,000 you have on savings in one place and put it with us, right?
I love that. That is, and especially with inflation being what it is, I'm sure a lot of people have had to dial back their giving lately. As they're buying. I mean, thank God eggs have gone down, but for a while there, it's like, do I tithe at church or do I buy eggs this month? And so, I think there are a lot of people who are probably asking that question. How can I do more for the kingdom, or how do I do more for the communities that I care about when I, might be cash strapped myself? Well, it's that easy answer. Well, at least just move your banking somewhere so that those funds that are going to be lent out, right? 90% of your dollars are going to be lent out. At least let them be lent out by people you trust to people you care about.
Yeah. We had a gentleman very early on in the Liberty Spenders podcast and named Scott Pyle. And Scott runs a financial services company. And one of the points he made, which really hit home with me and is something we're working on fixing, is if you're invested in an index fund like we are, that's where a lot of our retirement funds are. We're invested in the S&P 500 or something like that. There's a really, really good, there's 100% chance, right, that some of the businesses that we're invested in that we don't even know we're invested in are profiting off of gambling, abortion, and a host of other activities that we don't support. And so I think this is part of this idea of we can find simple ways that don't require this giant change in our behavior that help support the kingdom and also defund the stuff that's that in some cases is just straight up evil. But I wanted to ask something that I was thinking about too, as we were talking, if I walked into my, bank today and I said, hey, I'm really worried about cancel culture. I'm really worried about debanking. I'm worried that my money's being spent on stuff that I don't support. I'm certain I would get reassurance that that's not a risk, right?
Right.
So, but if you were advising somebody like me, what questions should I be asking of somebody to find out just how dedicated they might be to protecting me in a situation like that? What would you be asking?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. Because for a lot of these financial institutions, they have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. I mean, in some cases, millions of customers, and in a lot of cases, they're not paying any attention to most of those customers on a regular basis.
Right.
It's not until something happens, it's like, oh, wait a minute, Kurt's in the news. What did he say on his podcast? Hang on. Right. So that can happen really fast. And the decision is not going to be made by the person that you're talking to, right? It's probably going to be made by their boss's boss's boss. And so, the frontline staff is always going to give you assurances that they value your business and the relationship. And thank you for being a customer for Check's Computer 11 years.
Right.
And so I guess maybe the question to ask is, what are some of the organizations that you donate to? Because basically every bank and credit union, they have some pet projects that they donate money to. And in fact, you don't even have to ask, just go on their social media. They'll brag about it. That's the whole point. And so I think it's more a question of getting a sense of what they openly support, what they champion, what they're very vocal about. And you'll quickly realize, either this aligns with my values or it doesn't. Maybe they keep giving money to the local animal shelter. Maybe you love dogs and you're like, this is awesome. I love it. Then, that's probably fine. I don't know that I would recommend you make a banking change necessarily, but if every June suddenly their branches get a lot more colorful and they go and change their logo, maybe if that's not something that lines up with your worldview, you might say, one, I'm not loving how you're spending my money. And two, there's a good chance that at some point I or someone I care about is going to run afoul of your worldview and is going to get the short end of the stick. So I'm going to go ahead and make a proactive change and start moving my money somewhere where I feel comfortable from a conscience perspective on how it's being used. And I have reason to believe that they're going to continue to stand by me based on who they openly stand by right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's essential, right? Because again, the temptation here, and I'm just reading a book, and I'm hoping to have him on my podcast by an author named Jeff Martinovich, who talks about his own personal experience with, with some aggressive government prosecutors. And one point he makes, which is hitting home with me, is you can't wait until things go afoul to start protecting yourself. And you've got to take some steps proactively. So I think we all think that debanking or bad things, that happens to the other people, even if some of them are from time to time organizations we recognize, but it isn't going to hit home in Greenwood, Indiana, good old red-blooded, red county, right, kind of thing.
Yep.
Until it hits home and it's too late to do something about it.
Right. And during COVID, a lot of churches, it wasn't debanking necessarily, but, let's say a church had a loan from one of these big banks for their sanctuary, right? And then the county says, churches can no longer meet in person. And then the pastor has a hard decision to make. And the pastor says, well, when what the county says and what God says are at odds, I have to go with God on this one. Come what may, I'm going to obey what I feel God is calling me to do. And so you had churches that continued to meet, essentially in violation of, county ordinances or city ordinances. And then the bank would catch wind of this, and the bank would say, okay, well, if you are now operating illegally, that introduces a level of risk that didn't exist at the time when we made the loan. So you are now not the same borrower you were when we first gave you the money. And therefore, we need the money back. And so there were churches that were having multi-million-dollar loans called, you've got 30 days, you've got 60 days to pay the money back because you were essentially in like material breach of your borrower agreement, blah, blah, blah. And so that, to your point, Kurt, like, I mean, nobody saw COVID coming. I'm sure somebody, a small handful of people did, but most of us didn't see it coming, and nobody could have imagined, a connection between getting a loan from a bank to be able to build a sanctuary, and then potentially being in the situation where you think you might have to close your church permanently because of a pandemic. So this is why you do have to be proactive. You have to choose partners that and I mean, we don't have perfect knowledge, but to the best of your, knowledge, are going to stand with you no matter what comes, because who knows what the next thing is going to be. You can't predict it. The best you can do is prepare. And I think we do that by choosing to do business with people that we know are on the same page.
Yeah. Well, in a minute, I want to get into our lightning round, but before we do that, I want to go back to something we talked about, because you kind of brushed past it, and I think it's important in the conversation, at least for somebody like me, because I like stodgy, old, boring banking, right? Like, I think those are the guys who win. And so you guys aren't just Johnny come lately, hey, we started this 2 years ago. I think you said 67 years old?
That's right. Yep.
Was it and it was America's Christian Credit Union? Maybe it changed the name at some point, but it was, was ideologically the same bank then as it is now.
Yeah. We were founded by 5 Nazarene pastors. We were originally, it was Nazarene Ministers Credit Union, specifically for clergy. And over the years, we've grown. We've brought in other denominations. We're very ecumenical now. But yeah, always the same heart, the same identity, just different name.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Bucyrus, Ohio, and I went to a Christian Missionary Alliance church. The Nazarenes were the hot church in town, though. They had the hippest music and the most growing congregation. So I've always felt a little competitive with the Nazarenes, But I'm glad to know that they have their banking right. But that's cool because, I like to, when I think about my money, I like to look at people who've been through it all, right? And if you've been around for 70 years, you've been through multiple economic downturns, multiple crises, and those are the kinds of people you can trust when the next one hits, which inevitably it will, right? I'll probably have a couple more happen before I'm in heaven one day. And so being with somebody who's done this for 67 years, I think is key.
Well, and it almost feels like a blip now, but there was a group that came together a couple of years ago, and they were going to start a new Christian conservative bank, and it was going to be called Glorify, FI at the end. And everybody I was excited. We've been doing it for 67 years, but the more the merrier. We need more capacity. This is an exciting thing. And they ended up, they raised a bunch of money, and they were trying to get a charter to start a bank, and they ran out of money before they could actually get off the ground, and ultimately, couldn't start. And it's a reminder of how hard it is. Financial institutions in particular are just insanely hard to start and really hard to build the momentum to actually get through. And so, there are a lot of people who are probably waking up, wanting to kind of be like the public square of banking, maybe. And that's exciting, but also it's a lot of work. And so it's us having, we're established, we've been around a while. It's kind of embarrassing. A lot of people tell me they've never heard of us. And like, gosh, we need to do a better job of getting our name out there. But we have been here, we've never had a down year. Like, we've never lost money. So, you're absolutely right. When it comes to your money, you don't want to take a chance on somebody who has a really cool vision, but doesn't necessarily have the history to support that.
Yeah. I mean, the guys who survived 2008 and who were through the 2000 internet, bubble, all that, those are the ones that you want to be with. But so I wanted to make sure we hit on that. But now it's time to do our lightning round. We'd like to go through every guest with 3 final questions. There's no real buzzer, so very little accountability. But 60, 90 seconds on what legacy do you hope to leave behind, or maybe you hope ACCU leaves behind in its work?
Okay. So Christian education is a big passion for me. And we didn't get where we are as a nation overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And I think that a lot of our problems stem from the fact that most of our K-12 education and our colleges and universities basically were infiltrated by people who had an agenda. And now we're seeing the fruit of that work, that started back in the 60s. And so the legacy that I personally would like to leave behind, and it's very much tied up with my work here at America's Christian Credit Union, but I want Christian education in America to be stronger because we and others were willing to step up and actually help these faith-based schools reject this false dilemma of having to choose like operational vitality or missional fidelity. I think there's a lot of organizations out there that think that in order to continue operating with strength, they have to go easy on the mission, go easy on their stance. And I absolutely disagree with that. And I want to create the kind of support infrastructure so that these schools out there can be absolutely full-throated in their mission and in their efforts to raise up a generation who honors the Lord and is good citizens. They're good leaders. They're the ones who are running for office and are turning our cities and our counties and our states around. So I would say I personally would love to leave a mark on Christian education. I would love to leave Christian education in America stronger because of my work here at America's Christian Credit Union.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm with you. It's super important. Chris and I have been married 21 years, but we almost 21 in August, but we didn't start our family until recently. So we have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so education issues, which I always knew were important, all of a sudden are like front and center for us.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely, there's just no world in which I can put my kid in a public school.
Yeah.
And I
like
just
you
can't
said,
trust it.
You live in a really red area and you still don't feel like you can trust it. That's the crazy thing, is that even in communities where every single family is concerned about what's happening at the public school, still somehow they have no control over it. It's really bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what hit it home for me was, and I'm sure I'll see it today. We take our kids to the local public library, and what do they have on the bookshelf, sitting in the toddler section for books? But last year they had a section of books about how your mommy and daddy might have chosen your wrong gender. And I thought, how is this happening in Johnson County, Indiana?
Yeah.
That they're sticking that for my 3-year-old to pick out and look at. It really hit home to me that I'm not safe from this kind of ideology just because I don't live in California,
Right.
And we have to be vigilant as parents. And I just can't control what the public high school are doing. And so I think your passion for Christian education is essential. But for something like way, way off topic, I always like to give every guest a chance to talk 90 seconds about something that's captured their attention lately. Like maybe it's a hobby, maybe you've got a sports team you're a big fan of, or a spiritual insight, a good book you've read. What's something that's got you, occupied?
A couple months ago, somebody stole my catalytic converter. And I don't know if that's like a uniquely California problem or if that's happening all over. But I was mad. I was annoyed. It cost $2,000 to replace. But what's funny is now every morning when I get in my car, put the key in, turn it, and when it just makes a normal purring sound, I'm like, thank you, Jesus. I still have a catalytic converter. And I don't know. On the one hand, it's kind of depressing that, that's what I'm thankful for. But it did get me thinking just on this idea of gratitude. We're all constantly asking God for stuff, but once we get the stuff that we ask for, I think, at least for me anyway, I often forget that I ever even asked for it. I've already moved on to the next thing that I want. And so it's just funny how, as annoyed as I was that somebody stole my catalytic converter, it has created an opportunity. Every single morning it reminds me to thank God, that my car is functioning. And I've been trying to sort of apply that in other areas too. Like, what are all the things that I should be grateful for that I have stopped thanking God for because I just take them for granted? That's true for my wife. I've got 4 beautiful daughters. We've got a home. I have an amazing job, an awesome organization. So just reminding myself over and over again of all the ways that God has blessed me, and remembering to take a moment to just say, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. If you have 4 beautiful daughters and you're still alive, that's something to thank God for. I have 2 kids, and I think, how do people do this? But you're absolutely right. One thing I started doing years ago, I have to focus when I pray, and I also take a lot of notes during meetings, and so I used to throw away. So this is my notebook right now, and I used to throw these away. I'd go through them, make sure I captured stuff, and pitch them. And my wife started really encouraging me to keep them. So I now have probably 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years of journals. And every once in a while I'll go back and I'll just pull a random one. And the biggest lesson I learned from that is there's usually something, if I go through the pages, that I am praying about day after day after day that feels like the end of the world at the time, that I now forget even happened.
Wow.
Right. And to your point, I forget to, at the time, is like, God, if you could just do this one thing,
one thing.
And an answer comes, and then I even, maybe I'm grateful for it for a little bit, but then I actually, it's like, what have you done for me lately, kind of thing. So it's that has been a good exercise. In fact, I haven't done that in a while, so maybe I'll have to do that today.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a really good thought.
Yeah. So I always want to finish with, if somebody fast forwarded and only came to this one spot in our episode here, and you had 90 seconds, who should be reaching out to ACCU? Why should they be reaching out? Give the gratuitous pitch for America's Christian Credit Union.
Okay. Well, spending or investing money is a form of speech. And here in America, we enjoy the First Amendment. We have freedom of speech. And I think people forget that how they use their money is essentially a form of speech. And that's why boycotts are so effective, right? So when everybody stops shopping at Target, or everybody stopped buying Bud Light, whatever, right? When you stop spending your money in a certain way, you send a really clear message. And when you spend your money in a different way, you're also sending a really clear message. And so when you entrust your money to a financial institution, you are essentially deputizing them with your voice. When you put your money in a checking account, you are giving them permission to speak on your behalf with that money, because they are going to go out and they're going to invest it. And so if you aren't sure that you and your financial institution are on the same page, there's a good chance that they're essentially speaking for you and taking your voice, but using it perhaps even against you without you realizing it. And so I really encourage people to think about the communicative power of their money. And of course, that's what Liberty Spenders is all about. But, especially when it comes to banking, and choosing to align yourself with a financial institution that shares your values, that's going to not take your voice and co-opt it, but take your voice and amplify it and allow you to make an impact, in your community and across the country that you wouldn't have been able to have on your own. And you certainly wouldn't have been able to have if you were working with one of these big banks that routinely takes your money and uses it for things that violate your conscience and your values. So, for anybody out there who's curious, I would encourage you, join the Christian banking movement. It really is a movement. You're not alone in this. There are a lot of people waking up to this. So join the movement that ACCU has been leading for now almost 70 years, and see how even your checking account could make an eternal difference.
I love it. And I really appreciate you joining us. And so for anyone who's listening and wants to learn more, you can get in touch with Frank or his employer at americaschristiancu.com and learn more about ACCU.
That's right.
And thank you so much, Frank, for your time. This has been great.
Thank you, Kurt. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We invite you to learn more about the Liberty Partnership community at libertyspenders.com. And you can also grab our new book again at libertyspenders.com/free. And if you love this episode, make sure you like and subscribe so more people can hear it. And also pop over and give us a review, something really friendly and nice, because I read them all. Until next time, see you soon. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Liberty Spenders Podcast. If you're a business owner, we hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights on how to grow your business.
If you enjoyed the show, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us reach more entrepreneurs and leaders like you who are ready to make an impact.
And write something flattering, because I read them all. Don't forget to grab your copy of Liberty Spenders too, available now on Amazon and at libertyspenders.com. It's packed with proven strategies to help you reach the 76.5 million consumers who are looking for brands that share their values.
We'll see you next time as we continue exploring how to grow your business with purpose and conviction.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode and the one after that.